Kevin, thanks for joining.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm fine. It's always funny prepping like all of the stuff that you do to have a show and then like go to the place. You know what I mean? Is it's like own separate like entity of tasks to complete.
So there's a whole lot of stuff. You have a show coming up at Brigitte Mulholland's gallery in Paris this
Yes.
upcoming week, right?
Yeah, it opens on Friday, the 13th,
So Friday,
ironically.
February 13th, 2026. It's
Yes,
exciting
in Paris.
in
So
Paris.
in approximately 24 hours, I will be in Paris, which love.
Amazing. So have you shown with her before?
Yeah, I was actually in her inaugural show last year. I think it was 2025, 2024.
But this is your first
Um,
solo show there.
it was my first solo with Bridget, but that kind of worked out nicely where was in Bridget's inaugural show, and then the week later I had a solo at 243 Lose in Margate. So it was like a fun, like, was in Paris for a week and then was in London for a week.
So kind of connected to Bridget's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
which was nice.
Yeah.
And Bridget and Ed and Diego, who run 243 Lose, have like a really good relationship, which is fun. And Diego is actually going to come to the opening with Bridget. So it's like, it'll be like, it's a very funny, like, it's like a flipping of what happened last year.
And thank you for sending images of the show. It's nice that I get
Oh, yeah, of
a
course.
chance to see the show, sort of a preview, a sneak peek preview. But it's really just beautiful, and I was really enjoying. There's a dollhouse in the show. I wonder
Yes.
if you could talk about that.
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah. I feel like this happens, like, my background's in sculpture and weaving, which has been an interesting thing to kind of come back around to because I feel like painting kind of changes like the chemistry of your brain or something, the way that you like look at things. And I've tried to make this sculpture like 3 or 4 times now, and it kind of never got to the place that it needed to be. So it feels uh, like a victorious thing to be like, oh, we like this has finally been brought into the world in the way that I had it in my mind. But it's essentially made completely out of like found material, the like infrastructure. So it's like made of like an antique easel, an art crate, and a ladder that I've had in the studio for like years, which has been nice to be like, it's fully just all of that stuff. But it has about like 8,000 bricks hand applied to the whole surface, which I think helps understand like what is kind of going on. But I'm like, I feel like when you see images of it, basically it's a dollhouse from the face, but then as you like rotate around, you see the place where you would be like playing in the dollhouse is a theater that has devored curtains and like well, devoré, but it's the French word for devour. But basically, it you're able to scrape the velvet parts off of the velvet, so you're like left with the net and then the surface. So you can dye them two different colors because they're different fabric compositions. Um, but it's
So
been
this is a
interesting. I
kind
feel
of fabric, a French fabric.
yeah. So it's it's a process. So I bought the velvet white. And essentially, the way that velvet's made, it's kind of like carpet where there's a pile. So like there's like a woven structure that holds like the little hairs, and like they look like this, where it's like a V, where like the pinch is where it's sitting in the fabrics, and then the little fingers stick up like this. Um, but you're able to, it's sodium bisulfate. Um, Basically, this chemical you apply to the surface, you let it dry, and then you iron it. And then there's like a thermodynamic reaction that essentially deteriorates cellulose fibers. So the velvet, the like hairy bits are cotton, and then the netting is silk. So basically, the silk doesn't react to this Devore paste.
The design or pattern or whatever you would call it really recalls your paintings.
Yeah, it was funny as I've done it before for I did the material in Mexico with Ed and Diego, and I made like a big wall of it. So it was like a very big surface, which I've never done something that big before, which like kind of has its own complications. But it's interesting to kind of think about the because I think in the paintings they kind of act almost like figures or something. Like there's like a kind of quality where they have individuality, each like mark. where in like this format, it's like doing like repeat print or like silk screening fabric, where you're like looking at the entire entity and being like, well, it needs to have more weight on this side as it like repeats across, and like repetition of mark versus like uniqueness of mark.
So in your paintings, they're almost like representations of cloth or fabric in a sense.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Yeah, I would say that's like pretty spot on. Like it's like the I think my background in weaving kind of informed this like even the way that I paint, which has been interesting, where like friends who are like painters, when I was like kind of starting this process, were the way that I actually apply the paint essentially is it's like all the vertical lines get put in this way, and then I blend everything left to right, which is, I think, not the way that other people maybe do this, but I think basically it's how you weave, where you like set up all your warp threads and then you throw everything left to right. But basically, it's like filling a vessel that way in this like kind of hierarchical way. So like that kind of happens like that, which has been like it makes sense when you do it, but it's like all that classic like thousand ways to skin a cat thing.
So you're kind of painting from the perspective of a weaver in a sense.
Yeah, I would say so. Yeah, because it's like I like often like I'll start making compositions with just like torn paper, so just like rip up a bunch of paper and then like kind of move it around and then make a drawing of that and then kind of keep iterating through that process and then taking that and then like kind of making almost like a landscape of this little situation. It's yeah, but it's the kind of it's always like in the vision of cloth where it's like it's always fabric, which is like a funny thing.
I can see that. I was really fascinated with your process because it is, to me, quite opaque. Like I can't tell what's going on there.
Yeah.
Usually I can tell.
Yeah, totally. I think like I've had visits with people where I think I've explained to them what I thought was like clear, and then at the end of the conversation they're like, "Oh, all of this paint." I'm like, "Oh, none of that's paint." Like it's so basically what happens is Artel, shout out Artel. They don't ship to the US anymore, which is annoying, but they make amazing stretchers, and
What
they're
is it called?
Artel,
Artel?
Artel.eu. It's like a family-owned business in the Netherlands, but they make stretchers, and they're incredible because, well, they do I don't know if they do wood, but they definitely do aluminum. But their aluminum stretchers, their joints are like L shapes. So you slot the L into the corner of the frame, and then you tighten down with bolts. So like they're not like finger joints. So they're like incredibly strong and just will never warp.
Do they expand?
A little bit, but it's what I'm doing. It's like that's less of the problem,
Yeah.
um, because basically I'm just trying to keep any like force of like contraction from occurring on the like lengths of the bars or like warping like this way. But like these like work out perfectly. But so I have these specific bars and with a really heavy linen, so that's stretched over and primed like you would for like a normal oil painting. And then the top layer is acrylic. Um, and then it's cotton fibers mixed with PVA and acrylic and into giant Home Depot buckets. And then the primed surface is laid parallel to the floor on sawhorses, so it can be like raised up a little bit. And if like, have you ever made paper before?
You kind of mix it in big buckets and so
Like
forth,
tubs?
tubs, yeah.
Yeah, in that
The mulch of it, right?
yeah, it's like
Yeah.
literally mulch. But
Yeah.
then also this like it's called a decal, but basically you scoop out all the fibers and then you take the frame off and then you have your sheet of paper. But like that operates under the context of like if you had a round decal, you would have a round sheet of paper. Like the decal could be any dimension, but that's what's determining
The decal is like the
the sheet of
frame.
paper. The decal is the frame that you use to like scoop up
Yeah.
the papers, but the in this process, the stretcher bars are basically the decal, where it's like it's what's casting the shape. So like you pour all the fibers across and everything just falls off the edge because that's the edge. But it's like if those frames were like triangles, like it would be a triangular shape painting, but because like we're operating in this kind of specific methodology, it's like it's a rectangle, which feels kind of like redundant to point out, but I guess in the same way, maybe people would find like redundancy to be like, it's a painting on fabric. And it's like, Well, yes, of course.
You work on it flat then.
Well, so it's everything is spread across, and the linen is super heavy, so that basically at the center point it doesn't dip. It will contract back up so that it's completely flat. And basically, it takes like 24 hours to dry, and I just put fans on it. And then we'll come in the next day, and then you do like a layer of like clear gesso and acrylic so that those fibers are protected. And then I'm able to paint on that surface. But there's kind of like a whole dance that happens before painting even occurs. But that all that like texture and like crumbly is the texture of the surface. And then like you'll see texture that comes from brush where it's like the lines of like a brush stroke because of the paint is so like impasto, like thick when it's applied.
So that's basically just the substrate.
Yeah, so a lot of the work is done like prior to the actual painting, which has been interesting, especially like these like in a glorified way, like they're all gradients because like they're kind of behaving like the way that fabric like undulates across like a rod. Um, but the you would think that that kind of like rocky surface would make it more difficult to like make a gradient, but actually it's kind of makes it a little more forgiving because the like when you do like dry brushing, it almost kind of does that thing where like paint will just get into the cracks in a way where like if you really scrub at it, you can get it out, but like if you don't really scrub at it, then you kind of get this like natural gradation. So it's like I end up only mixing 4 or 5 colors from like lightest to darkest to achieve like a smooth gradient.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
surprising.
Yeah, like all the blending happens like on the surface. So it's like everything gets applied vertically and then essentially it's like a scrubbing motion back and forth and then like kind of going back. It's like this kind of like just like keep scrubbing it like over and over again until you're like, I think it's done now.
So this is all
But
in acrylic, right?
this is all oil.
Oh, this is oil paint. So
Yeah,
the
so it's
priming itself is like acrylic and gel, or gel
yeah.
mediums with, I suppose it's acrylic gel.
Yeah, it's this brand called Lucas. It's like a German brand, but the acrylic is quite cheap, which is great for this application because it doesn't have a ton of pigment because that's not really what I'm looking for. I'm like looking for those binders. So it's like all the like vehicles and mediums that are in the acrylic paint is like what I want in the cotton fibers because basically I just want to make this like united like sheet of plastic basically so that it's just kind of paused in time.
Amazing. So it's almost like paper and plastic in a kind of a mulch, and then
Yeah,
dries, and
exactly.
that becomes the substrate. I'm quite happy we're having this conversation because
Yeah.
I almost emailed you months ago after I saw your work at, I think it was a show at Derek Eller, maybe in like the
Oh yeah.
backspace.
Yeah, that was in November of yeah, last year.
And I was like, how is he doing this? I was just really, really interested. Like I said, I normally have a pretty good idea of how something's done,
Totally.
but I just couldn't determine the process. And I was like, how is this happening? So this is really awesome. Thank you for sharing this.
Oh my God, yeah, of course. Yeah, it's a very funny, I mean, it stems from, I think, the fiber background where it's like, I have like binders, like they're 4 inch thick. I have 4 inch thick binders that are just dye notebooks where it's like um, it's a brand called Jacquard, but they make dye, but it's every single Jacquard dye, acid, and MX, and across 4 different fabric types. So it's like it's like that kind of like method. I think it has penetrated this other situation too, where it's like uh, I don't know. It's interesting. A lot of my friends do like scenic work and prop work, and I feel like listening to them talk, there's like this weird identity that like, I'm like I don't do this, but I want to.
I really enjoy that your work it feels very fresh, I think, because you're coming at it from these perspectives. You have a very, it seems like there's a lot of cross-pollination happening with
Totally.
different mediums and different disciplines, I should say.
Yeah. I really appreciate that. Yeah, I think my logic for I think for like making stuff is like uh yes, like they're like art historical precedent is important. I think it's important for like a lot of reasons, none that are particularly interesting to get into in this moment, but there's a reason why. But I think within that, it's like I think to make or to like be an artist at this time, like we all have YouTube, like we all have like these uh, ways to learn how to do something. Where I'm like, I don't necessarily believe that everyone thinks that the best way to express the idea that they're interested in expressing is through canvas wrapped on stretchers. You know what I mean? And I think that kind of like thing I think works for certain things, but then I think like this dollhouse conversation is like the other part of that, where it's like this feels like as crucial as the painting does, because I think a lot of times too, like you'll get stuck in that position where it's like a painter who makes sculpture, and it's like it's interesting to like see how people like I guess uh like rank things or what's that word, like when you categorize, but like
Hierarchy?
yeah, or it's like taxonomy where it's
Yeah.
like there's like a yeah, it's interesting.
I think it was Clement Greenberg said that sculpture is something you back up into when you're looking at a painting.
Yeah, I'm like
It's like the
sure, like
classic the ridiculous modernist, you
yeah,
know.
and I'm like sure, but I'm like, can you build a house? No, like, and I think that's the thing is that like ultimately it's like a similar thing with like Trump Loy and like Cubism time where it's like all of that like really really highly skilled like faux finishing labor was like viewed as like blue collar like sub fine art, and it's like it's just like like the a that's a crazy thought, and b like just like that's just not true at this point, whatever. But it's like so interesting how like exclusivity is built into things in a way where it's like it's almost unnatural. It's like how strange.
Yeah, it's all context, right?
Yeah,
Cultural
totally.
context. So for the house, you said each brick was built individually. You
Yeah.
each
that
8,000 bricks.
yeah, that there's do you know about this thing called Pixel Chicks?
No,
It is an iconic toy from like 2000 like 8, 7, like that zone. But I'm sure you know what a Tamagotchi is.
I do.
So it's essentially a Tamagotchi, but it's like a girl who lives in a house. And you're able to like play games and like try on different outfit. Like it's this kind of like mini game thing, but it's like a physical plastic house with a screen, and then she appears on the screen. But there's like it's like meant to look like a driveway, but you're basically able to plug the houses into one another so that you're able to like go hang out with your friends girls in their houses. And then like this kind of went on where like then there was a mall where you could work at a salon, like there it kind of just grew from there. But like in my mind, like that's like what this object is. It's like this is a Pixel Chick's home, and it's like that kind of like the specificity of the like plastic house where it's like this is like it's fully a sculpture with a screen inside, in the same way that this is like a sculpture with a screen inside. The screen is just a stage. And like thinking about like uh, how like the rectangle is primarily the way that we gain new consciousness or like knowledge is like literally looking at rectangles, whether it's like our phone, the TV, a book. It's like always a rectangle that like information is being fed to us through versus like experiential, which is like a different thing. But it's like even kind of goes back to the painting sculpture thing where it's like reading a book versus like just going on a mountain and like these kind of different realities.
They're like portals, right?
Yeah, literally. And it's like that kind of like I feel like it's interesting. I think like video games are like a funny like I just play a lot of games, but like it's funny because you have like the screen, which is like the thing that you need to see the world, but then the world is like generated by this other like box that you're like it's like a weird conduit between you and a screen, which I think is interesting. Because often it's uh like phone to face or like book to face. Like there's nothing that is like the intermediary in the same way that like drawing is pencil to paper and like playing video game is hand to controller to system and then the system to the TV. Like there's this like thing that is like kind of keeping you from touching the primary source or something in the same way that you don't like well I guess maybe people do paint with oil paint with their fingers, but probably not suggested.
But there's always going to be some mediation.
Yeah, and like that mediation is like a whole world and like narrative is like a funny like thing or like that you have like a I guess like limited agency over versus like if you watched like a movie where it's like you're kind of participating in a collective dream versus being like the collective dream, I can like manipulate it. And like obviously like something like Skyrim where it's like completely like you can build your own narrative versus something where it's like completely like an A to B like murder mystery where the murderer is the murderer.
It's like open world type stuff.
Yeah, and like that kind of yeah, it's funny how like a lot of things can be built into like dichotomy, and then that dichotomy allows like gray area to then kind of like run free.
Do you play a lot of games?
Yeah,
Video games?
yeah, I feel like it's been interesting. Like my lovely roommate Danny, who we have started modding old systems, which is very interesting because you're able to kind of like it's a community, it's like a homebrew where basically you're able to like put new operating systems on to systems. Like we just did it to our Wii U, and you're able to like play anything you want now, if you catch my drift.
Got Game Genie situation or
Yeah, it's like essentially it's turning it into an emulator, but it's funny because like the you're emulating the thing that it is. Do you know what I
interesting.
mean?
So you
So
can
it's like
play
instead of putting a disc into it, you're able to use an SD card to play whatever game you're gonna play.
so you can
But
access any game via this modding.
yeah, so it's been very interesting because it's like obviously there's so many things that are kind of like lost. Not like lost, but it's like there's like a whole secondary market now for like video games that's like kind of lame, where it's like everything's just so expensive and like kind of you know, it's like we played this game called Mother that that's like the Japanese name is Mother and then it's called Earthbound, but it came out in the 90s and it was like one of the first kind of like well not first, but it like kind of brought popularized this like turn-based combat. But like if you buy like a Super NES copy of it, it's like $500.
This is like Final Fantasy type
Yeah, it's
game.
very Final
Yeah.
Fantasy, but like very strange. Like it is like the music is insane, like the narrative is insane. Like it's all like it is this kind of game where they just don't make games like this anymore based on the like because it's basically really going to rant, but like the because everything's digital download now. So you don't get any of the like you don't get the case with the manual, but it's like games used to like the expectation was that you're taking notes. So it's like if you're not taking notes, like you would not be able to remember like the amount of times we just had to like look stuff up because we were like, I have no idea what you are asking me to do in this moment. Like there's like an area where it's a desert and you find you're supposed to find a grain of sand and or sorry, a grain of rice and talk to the grain of rice and it's like this grain of rice tells you that it lost its friend basically and you have to find this other grain of rice, but it's like literally a grain of rice in a desert and you're like just walking around being like ostensibly I have no idea.
I wonder what the link is between your interest in video games and your work.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think like graphically there's like definitely something occurring just like that kind of like the crunch and then the smooth. um but I think it's interesting because I think the press release that Bridget actually wrote, which I was this feels so like in tune in a really specific way about like she references multiple narratives, which I've like talked to her about, but like this kind of thing where like that is the thing is that like so many narratives can be applied to this and that like ultimately there's like probably like five stories in human history like that you just swap the names and the action like it's like everything is kind of interchangeable in this like very funny way. But I think maybe growing up like that's how I was like being fed narrative and then like continued to do so where it's like did you ever play Kingdom Hearts?
No, I'm familiar with it though.
Essentially it's just like a light versus dark narrative, but like that really like evolves and weirdly like changes on itself like not to go insanely deep, but basically there's like a shot like there's a light self and like a shadow self and like the shadow selves are like these heartless, but it's basically a person's heart would be like corrupted and they like turn into the shadow, and that's the first one. And then in the second one you find out that like when that process occurs, like another form is made called a nobody, and it's basically like a skin of the person, but then like stronger ones have consciousness. And then there's like this whole debate about like what denotes like or like what makes up being a person and like why is this person not a person, like ostensibly they look like a person, like why, like, and there's it gets very philosophical very quickly, but it's like because it's a game, like you can just take it as it is in like a funny way where it's like there's something still enjoyable versus like film where it's like you kind of like have to like go along for the ride in like a different way where it's like if you're not enjoying yourself then it's like whatever versus like having gameplay that's fun but then your narrative is
You're an
confusing.
active participant
Yeah,
in creating that narrative.
yeah, exactly, yeah.
And in the same way in your work, you're obviously the active participant in creating the narrative in
Yeah,
your paintings and sculpture.
yeah, it's yeah, I think it's also that kind of space of like being an active participant but like actively like creating a zone for someone else to project into, which I think that's the thing that becomes funny where it's like you can like make a game but if no one plays it then like
They activate the game by playing
yeah,
it,
like
and you act.
you need the
Yeah,
player in the same way that like I feel like these paintings need people to look at them, and I think there's like a funny like I started making these paintings with mannequins in them, which is like the Derek show is
I
mostly
remember that.
those images, and like it kind of spawned from this thing of like I want to paint a painting that has the viewer included in the painting so that even when the gallery is closed, someone's looking at this thing and like how that like operates and like that it's like not a person, that's like these mannequins are like they're humanoids I guess, but it's like
It's a
is
stand-in.
this a person shape, like I guess.
So, but for the paintings in the show at Bridget's, there aren't any figures.
Yeah, it's completely absent. I think the addition of the dollhouse made me feel like that kind of it's like in the same way that it's like Silent Hill, for instance. Like Silent Hill as a game is often scary because there's no one there, and like that void does something else versus like having like someone like stalking you, which is like scary for like obvious reasons. But like this kind of emptiness and like asking someone to interject themselves into this emptiness and like kind of trying to emphasize this like push in the opposite direction of like it's just there's a void and the void is either going to be filled or it's not, and like how is that filled I guess is the question.
I suppose there is indeed also an openness and a kind of
Yeah,
inviting the viewer to enter the space. If it was occupied, it might be more difficult to do that.
to put yourself in there, and I think that's it's also like the way the show that's going to be or the way that the show is going to be installed is like Bridget's space is like it's three rooms essentially. The front room where you can see with windows, the middle room that's kind of like it's a funny shape where it's like a long wall here and then like this like little cubby and the dollhouse will be in the cubby, so you won't be able to see it from the front room, so you will like kind of happen upon it, which will have this like bit of a reveal situation. And then the back room is going to have the two really large paintings that are 80 by 100 vertically, and they fit in the room. Like they touch the ceiling and they touch the wall. They touch the walls that they're on the side, and then they touch the bottom too.
So they
So it's
just
like,
cover the whole wall.
yeah. And then they have a gap in the middle and they're covering windows. So like the show will terminate and the viewer seeing this painting that there are these two paintings that essentially are behaving like curtains, like in a sculptural manner, but then also like light is emanating through the crack of them. So it's this kind of like opening of the curtains where now from the front room where you have all the stages, the viewpoint has flipped where like you're looking down at an empty stage and now you're at the precipice of the curtains opening and you are on the stage. Yeah, so it's I think it'll be interesting to see because I feel like this happens, I mean like where it's like when you make something in your studio and then you're like cool, great. And then it leaves and then it goes into another place and you're like okay, now I'm like seeing this past its like labor or something, or it's hard where it's like there's junk all over the studio. So it's like hard to see it.
Well,
And then,
also, I imagine your concept of it changes once
oh,
you
totally.
put it in a different context.
Yeah, totally. And it's like these were made site specific, so it's like nice that it's like okay, that all like works out. But it's like site specificity is always funny because I think in sculpture it's less of a problem, but I think in painting it can be like cringe sometimes where it's like it feels like overproduced or something versus like it has like a natural quality where it's like I hesitate to use that word because I think that word is raw in its own way, but it feels correct.
Like you don't want it to feel forced.
Yeah, exactly. Where you're like, oh, he really wanted to have a clever intervention, and it's kind of like never a great feeling when you walk away from something like that.
You want it to feel easy. You want it to feel just like it sort of like happened.
Yeah, there's like it's so funny. I like it's like the effortlessness, like effortlessness will always be chic, and like it's an unfortunate reality, but it's like unless like there are certain figures, it's like you really have to like put a lot of effort in to come to that. So it's like you have to really be like sweating behind the scenes, and then once it's up, you're like, oh, I didn't know that would happen, and you're like, you have like schematic measurements like in your hand behind your back, and it's like you knew exactly that's how it was gonna happen.
Reminds me of something Robert Ryman said. He said that no matter how hard a painting is, it can't look like you suffered.
Oh no, not at all. And I think that's actually so funny you say that too, because I think I don't like it's I mean like you only have like the experience that you have, but I think coming from weaving, like I in the studio like I liked to make work and that like I the act of doing. But in the same way it felt like I was like self-flagellating like every day where I was like this is not fun and it is like an unpleasant experience to like do, but the like outcome feels like right. But then it was like once I started to paint, I was like, oh, not only do I enjoy this, but like the outcome feels like really right in this way that you're like, oh, I guess I didn't need to be suffering this entire time. But like that was the expectation. And I think that it's so interesting to see like I think when I look at my old work where it's like weaving, like hard like weaving like capital W weaving next to the paintings, I'm like, you can like it's weird. Like you can tell well, it's like maybe I can tell because like I was one who
Oh
said.
yeah, you can
But
tell. I mean, I think people
yeah,
know. People know even if it's almost subconscious or something, they can still pick up on the I mean, it's really I think what art is you're creating objects that emit a certain kind of energy.
totally. Oh, totally. And it's like it's undeniable, but it's also it's like it's hard to like figure out what it is too because it's like you can spend a lot of time, but it's like ultimately like what good does that do you in like a sense where it's like it's kind of like an unattainable reality to kind of grasp. But it's so interesting to see where I think with like the making paintings, it's like funny where like you can really have a breadth of conversation with people where it's like someone can literally just be like, I like that shade of yellow. And like we can have a conversation about how like I learned how to make paint and like this specific shade of yellow is like a Renaissance, whatever, blah blah blah. Or like someone can like ignore that it's made of paint essentially, where it's like conceptually you can talk about the paint, but they're not talking about the paint in that way. They're talking about the paint as like material. And you kind of go to this like very airy other place. And it's like yeah, true. You can just never really pinpoint what is activating people because it's activating different things in different people. But like the activation is what's happening, and like that is like the important little like kernel of it.
That's it. That's everything, isn't it?
It's very strange because it's not many things do that. It feels like
It can be any kind of art that you put this energy into, and then it's almost like a prism, right? And it can split
totally
off in all these directions,
yeah. And
just
I
as
think
you were saying.
that's yeah, no, like I think that's like a great like image to picture because it's like I think yeah, agree. Because I think it's you can go like a lot of places with that. Where I think it's like that is art making like at its core, and then I think all of the like auxiliary businesses and features to like the art world. It's kind of like a separate thing where they want to take that light and kind of bring it back to a really sharp focal point, which is like an
That's right.
interesting thing to kind of work with and against.
People try to bottle it.
Yeah, and you're like, it's just not possible.
You can't. It's so unquantifiable what it is
Yeah.
even. We
No,
can't,
totally.
and we can't talk about we can only talk about maybe it's almost like the via negativa. Do you know what that is
No.
in mystical terms? It means you can only describe God as what it's not.
Okay, totally.
You can't say what it is because it's like beyond language. I think art is the same
Yeah,
way.
totally.
You can talk around it.
Yeah, totally. That's so, yeah. I also think there's like a funny thing with perfume, which is like it like there are words to describe the thing that you're talking about, but it's like there's often words that are like invented to describe the thing.
What
Like
words?
like gourmand is not specifically designed for that, but like it's used in this way, and like gourmand basically is like anything that is like food smelling. So it's like often sweet. So it's like if you have like a perfume that's like has like a cookie note, you would like refer to as gourmand, but also like something that's like a kind of like caramel chai, like coffee, like these kind of things that would also be gourmand. And like this word petrichor, which describes like the smell of like rain, basically, where it's like or like wet concrete, but that kind of like feeling that you have when you smell like when it's raining. But it's like these words are like only used for this thing, like kind of nothing else. And then like you kind of have to just go on vibe because you're like also like selling like me trying to describe a perfume to you is like it just relies on me being a good advertiser. And it's like if I'm a bad advertiser, then you're never gonna buy the
And it
perfume.
won't be the actual experience of smelling that perfume.
No. And it's so it's interesting. It's interesting in this like context of like the God conversation too, where it's like all of this like you like the campaign, like all this kind of like buildup of like what the perfume is in the same way that like an organized religion or something like there's this kind of ritual obviously that occurs like in the group versus like a singular ritual and like how the object is used in the home versus like this kind of other thing. Did you grow up religious?
I was raised Catholic, but
Okay.
not I was never very serious about it. I'm still trying to like diffuse some of the guilt,
Oh,
it's like
it takes a lot because it's like it's funny. Like I feel like my one of my really good friends, Paige Auerbach, she's a director at Anton, but she is Jewish, and we will talk like I will say things to her like, "Oh, you know this thing," and she will look at me like I have no idea what you're talking about, and I'm like, "Totally, this is not a universal experience, and I'm expecting it to be, and it's just not." Which is,
I do the same thing.
and you're like, "Huh." You got no shame about
It's
that.
no
Love that
shame.
for you.
But I feel like there's a lot of shame. So my father was Jewish, and so
Okay.
we didn't go to temple or anything like that.
Okay,
But
yeah, yeah.
I feel like I got like a really healthy, I would say healthy, ironically, but a nice mix of shame and guilt
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
Catholic and the Jewish. Oh boy. Oh
Yeah,
man. So
it's real.
where did you grow up?
I grew up in Philly, so like kind of close. It was nice. Like I liked being there. It's like a cool place to grow up because I feel like um everything is like it's like big still, but it's like not big as New York, but it's like not small. Like I went to Micah for college. So like in Baltimore it's like teeny in like that triangulation of things. So it was nice to grow up there, and it's like a funny like I feel like I learned a lot being there, and like I love going back. Also, Pennsylvania as a state is like very weird, where it's very weird. Like I grew up going to have you been to Lancaster?
No.
You should go. You'd love it. It's essentially where all the Amish people live, basically, and Hershey Park. But they have great antique malls, and you can do tours of like the Amish farms, and it's so interesting to like listen to them speak because there is like such a religious quality to like that whole lifestyle, but then also like the kind of reverence they have for land, and obviously there's like that is also raw, especially like it's complicated. Everything's complicated, but it's like interesting. I think like as an artist going and hearing them talk about things in a way that you're like, I think that way about like linen fabric in the same way that you're talking about the like the corn or
Like a kind of
the
reverence.
baby pigs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like this funny um like it feels like I feel like grateful to be in a position to like work with this these things.
Was that
And
close
like
to where you grew up?
so it was like an about an hour away. So we would go in the summer for like usually like a long weekend, which would result we would go to Hershey Park and then we would go like to Amish like markets and farms. So it was like it was a very fun like it was close and easy, which was nice. I like growing up in Philly, but it weird like really weirdly like stuck in my mind that like it's like such a stark comparison to go from a city like Philadelphia to like flat land, no electricity
It's a different
vibe.
world.
Yeah, totally. And like it's just a very interesting thing. But my mom's wife is actually from New York. So grew up like when I was like older teen would come to New York, which was cool. But it's like
So you were pretty close enough to New York. You could come for shows
yeah.
and things like that. Were you interested in art growing up?
Yeah, I think this is an unfortunate thing to say, but whatever. Um like or not unfortunate, that sounds so dramatic. But so we had like art class, which I was in, and it was like we had honors, but not AP, which like is a separate thing for like high school. But like you know, learn about Cezanne and like Mary Cassatt, like not necessarily things that I found particularly interesting at that time, but have a very distinct memory of going into the city with my mom to see the Marina Abramovic show at MoMA and seeing that, especially coming from like Catholic background, and being like, oh, y'all can really fuck it up. Like this is like a very different thing where it's like like performance as an idea was never brought up in high school art. Like it's like it was truly like drawing and painting. And I think seeing that kind of shifted a lot really fast because it's like initially we went to go to the it was like a Tim Burton exhibition that was up at the same time as the Marina show, but like when you bought the ticket for both of them. So we went to both. Um and was
Was
like,
this the artist is present? That
yeah,
one? Yeah.
yeah, it
She
was
was
because
like, where you sit there?
yeah, it was the sitting thing, but I really remember the it was like the upstairs bit where it was like the two things I remember like I have like an image in my mind about is the table from that performance she did where it was like here's a table of things, do whatever you want to me thing, and it was like the table of the things. So it was just like the like historic object of
There was
that.
like a knife and a gun
Yeah,
and
and
some other.
yeah, like cigarette, like it was like just pick a thing and it was there. And then the work where it's like it's two walls that are like close together, but then it's like a naked person here and a naked person here, and you like scoot
Yeah,
between. I
yeah.
remember that very like vividly and being like there's such like a broader world that I'm not seeing in the position that I'm in, which I thought was like obviously like duh, but I think when you're like 15,
I mean, your mind must have been blown about like what art even
yeah,
like what art could do, what it is.
yeah, like fully. And then shortly after seeing, or maybe even before, but I remember seeing images online because then of course then went to MoMA's website and was like looking at it. Um, Wolfgang Lieb.
No.
I feel like you'd be into him. He's very cool, like old German guy. He did a show at MoMA. The like kind of centerpiece to the show was he lives I think he's on a farm, but like in like the Black Forest in Germany. But he keeps bees. And it's a giant rectangle of pollen. And it's like just what the work is. Just like a yellow square, but it's like 20 feet by 30 feet. Like it's like a huge bit of pollen. And I remember seeing that. Like that was like the same thing too, where I'm like there is so much more to this where it's like that kind of conversation about like objects mean what they mean by what they're made of and how they're made. And it's like, yes, you can like talk all day about like, like impressionists and like sure. But like that kind of space where you're getting into like modern art or whatever, where it's like there's a conversation about this thing in a way that's a little broader, which I found I think like as a 15-year-old like crucial development.
Going from impressionism to that is like hopping into a time machine and going hundreds of
Oh,
years into the future, literally.
fully. And then like having no like how did these things come to be between, which was like a very funny like
Interesting.
it also feels so like that's so contemporary. I feel like right now where it's like you can really skip ahead to like learning things really specifically in a way that you weren't able to before. And it's like kind of the thing with like alchemy too, where it's like a process that takes so long to like kind of come back around and this kind of like all of the steps and like that kind of thing, but then you can also just like see it, which is like a different funny thing.
It's a whole different thing to experience it in person, isn't it?
Yeah. It's been yeah, it's interesting.
Well, just in the case of your work in the show, I'm seeing the images that you sent, and they're as good as you could get from
Totally.
as an image, but seeing the actual texture of the object,
It's like a whole other
being in the
thing.
presence of the object is a whole different experience.
Yeah, it's I think that's it. So my lovely friend Izzy Luong shoots for me all the time and she's like incredible. And she I think she's really dialed in where it's like it's so funny where I'm like the images always look really good and then you like look at the thing and you're like there really is like a different you just can't capture this specificity of the object. But it's like almost like I rely on her so heavily like as a photographer with like a capital P where I'm like I like want you to make a beautiful image and like that kind of thing of like knowing how to make that happen, which is like almost more crucial sometimes than the being like the directness or something where it's like you want to try to conjure the feeling that the object is conjuring and that I feel like it's like a different beast, which is like so yeah, I don't know, it's hard. And also I think it's like we're so used to like which I guess this is like a separate topic, but the kind of like the iPhoneification of images is like unfortunate because it's like we're so used to seeing the hyper real in a way that when you like see like actual hyper reality, where I'm like, I feel like the images Izzy makes are like hyper real. It does like a different thing versus like if you're looking at like a digital camera from 2010, like that kind of atmosphere that's created through the medium of the camera is like a different it's very interesting. But yeah, totally. But it's yeah, like the lighting is very funny where it's like uh raking light is a saving grace because it casts little tiny shadows under all the little crumblies.
Well,
So then you
your
kind of
work is so textural and it's so specific in that way,
yeah, and it's funny where
tangible.
it's it's that and then the color too, where it's like the color is hard to capture like against each other. Um where often it's like well she'll take multiple exposures for multiple colors is what ends up happening because it's like you can in capture one you're able to like manipulate the like you can like pick different channels basically so it's like you can pick the like blue channel but sometimes like the blue is reading green because there's yellow in the blue so then you start to manipulate that but then there is a different green in the paint so then it starts to get like crazy. So then you shoot multiple exposures and you manipulate each color separately and then you composite them all together to get the image. So it's like I feel like yeah, not only am I asking her to like photograph the like most complicated like surface quality, but then it's also like okay, shoot these electric colors because they're all handmade, so it's just straight up pigment in linseed oil next to each
You
other
make your own
and have
paint.
transparency. Yeah, I started so I use some pre-made paint just because it's like at a certain point like like Old Holland Cad Red Light. I have nothing to improve on
Can't do
there.
anything
You know what I
better.
mean?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that's thank God. But like this color called nickel titanium yellow, for instance, like smaller brands make it, but often there's less. It'll be called like lemon pale, whatever. Like it's a little vaguer, but Gamblin makes nickel titanium yellow, but I don't love the texture of the paint from them. So I was like, I should just start making my own of this. And that's kind of like where then it all just started, where it's like you can really get so specific just off the bat in a way that I think people would benefit from, even if they just made a few colors, because I think it is crazy how much of a difference it makes in the surface quality, but then also the like a purity, which is also like a complicated word, but like it is like where it's like this is literally just like there's this great color called hematite chrome oxide spinel, but it's like incredible because it's like it's almost like when you melt dark chocolate, it looks like that. It's like it's incredible. Like I've never seen a color like it, and it's like it's just perfect as is. But it's like no brand makes that paint. So it's like I have to well now that Kramer is closed, sadly.
My friend
Uh,
who used to work, I had my friend
okay.
Mike who worked there for a number of years, now started his own company. I
Oh,
can
so
connect
my
you. Do you know
please,
Mike?
because my friend Caitlin, who is at MoMA, was whining to her about Kramer being closed, and she was like, "Oh, actually, they're opening a new like business. I guess I'm not sure if it's not a branch of Kramer. It's like kind of separate."
That was an interesting conversation. He was talking about how pigments they have different properties,
Yeah,
but the companies put things to homogenize them so they all seem the same, but actually they feel different. Maybe some are more stringy. They have different, just different
literally.
characters. They're like the whole the quality of them, almost as if they're conscious entities or something like that. The way he talked
Oh,
about it.
100%. I mean, it's like literally just the structures are different, and it's like it's interesting when you see like I feel like ultramarine is like a great example because it's like a cheapo ultramarine next to like a nice ultramarine. It's like it's so different.
It's
Like
a whole
it's like
different thing.
it's a whole different situation, and it's
Yeah,
like there's this do you know this brand Rublev?
heard of him.
I'm
Yeah,
obsessed with them. They make a
yeah.
few colors that I'm like can't live without. And I'm gonna have to because they're not making this orange color anymore for some reason. And well, they can't get the pigment anymore. And I'm like, so I just bought like 5 huge tubes of it. It was like,
Nice.
well, this will be a problem for me another day, but not today. Um, but they have two. They probably have more than two, but the two that I know I have that I'm thinking of, they have two ultramarines, and it's like one's like red tone and one's green tone, and it's like if you really look, you can see a difference, but it's like you would never know otherwise. But it's like that kind of specificity of like, yeah, like this is important at a certain point, and also they like stink in this like really funny way, and that like cheap ultramarine doesn't stink, and I'm like, huh,
Interesting. There's a whole another
like layer of something that's
dimension or
going on
layer
in
to
there,
it. Yeah,
yeah.
different smell even. That's fascinating. So Michael Ambron is his name,
Okay.
a friend of mine who started his own paint company and it's called Paint Makers Notes LLC,
Okay,
if
love.
you're interested in that. But
Yeah, I deeply am.
I want to talk to you a little about specificity. That's something that you've mentioned a couple times and something that I think about often. And I think the most interesting work is always going to be very specific.
Yeah. It's it's so interesting in that like so Danny who's my roommate, she has this music project called Cute Door. Um and like we've talked about the specificity in music where it's like it's so funny when you come across something where it's like I like think the first time this happened to me super directly was the song Aeroplane by Bjork. And it was like dating my ex at the time, and he lived in Glasgow, and I lived in New York or Baltimore at the time. And like listening to her sing about this like hyper specific like relationship, whatever, and being like, oh, this is like, is so. I feel this in like a way that is like sincere and real, but it's like so specific in this way that like actually that specificity builds like generality. It's really weird actually how that like kind of works where it's like or maybe not generality but it's like the specificity like allows more people to connect to it because like they think they're having a unique experience with the thing which they are but like that multiple people are having the experience and like you would think that specificity like I guess this is a very long-winded way to say specificity does not equal individuality which I think is like interesting as a thing.
What do you mean?
I guess like this like you can be incredibly specific as a maker but like that specificity I guess is like individual will theoretically but then the individuals who are going to experience it it's like how many hundreds of whatever people will like come to the same or similar conclusion about like the feeling that they're have about the thing. And obviously like when you get into like that mud, it's like obviously it's not the same feeling, but it's like, and like you kind of, it's like a linguistic nightmare a little bit, but it's that kind of thing of like yeah, it feels like the most successful, like whether it's like paintings or music or like whatever it is, like that specificity is like crucial to like make a thing uh like a touchstone to people or like allow people like access. And it's maybe there's like a like some kind of, I don't know, like what's the word? Like openness or because it's like diaristic ultimately, where it's like you're letting someone in or you're being vulnerable, the V word.
I think about the way in which you're using paint. It's very specific. The colors you're using are very specific. You're even making your own pigments because the texture is very specific and the feel is very specific and the energy there is very specific. The kind of your process of making these substrates that are deckled and that are have like a woven quality is very specific. You're coming have this specific element of the way you're painting a weft and a weave, weft and warp. Is
Yeah.
that right?
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah.
very specific. And then the content, the cloth, the theatrical quality, the curtains, what it is, that there are no figures. There's an openness to it like that. Every element, I think that might be why I was so drawn in the first place, is that it seemed very specific in a way that I think when you get so specific that it becomes very unique. And
Yeah,
it's like, I haven't really seen this before, that
totally.
because of the specificity there. And I wonder about that.
Yeah, it's my friend Samara who I shared a studio with. Like, I was having a kind of like, as most people do in the studio, like meltdown. Um, and yeah,
Very healthy. Yep.
universal experience. Um, but it was so interesting hearing her talk because I really like value her opinion and also like her work is like amazing. But just like listening to her kind of say kind of what you just said, where it's like this like I don't think people have seen the thing that you're making. And it's like, I think that is like a, also like a, can be a sketchy thing to say, I think, in this time where I'm like, everything has been done. So it's like, I don't want to like claim to something, but like that kind of like reassurance that specificity like resonates to people. And I was like, okay, interesting. It's like kind of like diffused the meltdown in like a really funny way where I was like, huh, sure, love.
It's hard
Uh,
because you never really know. You can never really see how it's perceived as the maker. It's so difficult,
no,
or
totally.
anybody, we're never, I don't think we're necessarily poor judges of our own work, but it's very difficult to edit and very
Oh,
difficult to,
you can never get far enough away. It's like you can only kind of be far enough away like 10 years later, and even if that's the case, it's like unreliable narrator, the narrator. So
it
it's
can go
like
both ways too. Something you might hate in 2 years, and then 5 years later, you're like, oh,
you're like
actually,
love
there's
it.
something to that.
No, totally. And I think yeah, it's interesting how time kind of plays into all of that because also like I'm like delusional in the sense that like the moment I make something and I'm like I feel like it's done, I am immediately like that's the best thing I've ever done. And then I put it away for 6 months and I'm like garbage. And then like 2 months later I come back around to it, but it's like this very funny thing where I'm like, hmm.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I'm way less skeptical in the moment than I am later. And I'm like, huh.
It's part of the process.
I also think it's like if I wasn't that way, I think it would be hard to make stuff. Because I'm like, you're in the studio alone, like, girl, you gotta gas yourself up. Like it's like a mechanism to like keep the train in motion.
Yeah.
Because I think it's like if you feel bad about the things that you're making, I imagine it would be complicated to go do it. Because you're like, well, this makes me feel like doo doo. So now
Or,
what?
or if you felt too good about it, then you wouldn't be.
Then you want to be there. It's a weird time. I feel like in art as whatever, just because I mean like art just reflects the world basically, which is like a hokey dokey, but whatever, like it's true. Like the things that are happening in the world are negatively impacting other like whatever. But it's interesting to see how that impact is doing like I think people who make stuff often like wrap up their personal value in the stuff that they make and the feedback that they get. And I think that becomes a dangerous game where it's like I think it's like it's good to roll with it, but then also like be like that is not the end all be all because that gets dark fast.
Yeah, especially in the culture which really values product in the way that we do.
Yeah, and like uniformity and yeah, like literary production where you're like I have X amount of solo shows, blah blah blah. Like it's a whole production, which is like yeah.
You're the product. So if you identify yourself as such, then you're setting yourself up for some difficult times ahead, right?
Oh, deeply. And it's yeah, I don't know. It's not fun, that part of it. And I think it's like a crucial part of it too, which is like I mean, I think everyone knows this, but it's like, you know, like if you want to make stuff, it's like I would go to the studio and make stuff whether there was an infrastructure or not. It's like I feel a desire to make things. I don't know, like if I would be making painting, but it's like and I've never had a point in my life where I hadn't been working on something like as a project at the bare minimum, whether it's like making clothes or like what like something just has to be done. But it's interesting like when like because I think the scale can tilt in the other direction where it's like there's kind of like a celebrity quality that is like interesting to like witness, but then you're also like eep like
Yeah.
surely that does weird things to
Keep it at
people.
arm's length, I think.
Yeah, it's strange.
So you went to Micah for undergrad,
Yeah.
and then did you move right to New York right after that?
I stayed in, so I went to Micah, graduated fiber. Well, I graduated fiber, and it's like basically the way that it works is it's like you can double major, but to double major, you have to do your thesis in that major as well. So, like, ostensibly, it's hard to graduate double major, but I could have graduated interdisciplinary sculpture as well because I had enough credits for it, but chose to do my thesis in fiber. So it was like this very funny, like, was like kind of living between those two worlds. Um, but graduated fiber, then did a 3 month residency in Iceland, weaving, which was incredible. And I think like really like reshaped the way that I thought about things and like the practice as a whole and that kind of stuff. And then was in Baltimore for like it was like 9-ish months, and I was working at this place called the Foundry. It was like a maker space, which was also helpful to kind of like learn just like new skills like the water jet and stuff like that. But then left and moved to New York after like in 2027 or no, late 2026. No, 2027, like December of
Oh,
2027.
2025?
2027. Oh, so oh my God,
Oh,
2017.
17, 2017. I was like,
She said I
yeah,
moved there next year.
next year. Yeah, well, I was like, well,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, it's
Yeah,
really a state of
so
mind after all. So,
literally. So
so,
I've been here for about like 9 years.
and just making art.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, I mean, the entire time, which has been nice, where it's like when the like, I basically was like working like at this place and then working in like a production company and was like this like, like, I made up a way. Well, I didn't make it up. I just like happened to be the only one who's good at it. So then was like, now I'm stuck doing this thing. But we were doing a build out for an Under Armour facility, and they had all these in like it was like rooms of these like built-in shelves. But I was like the only like I essentially figured out how to do the staining in this really particular way that they wanted. But I like tried to teach other people on the team and they couldn't do it. So basically I had to stain like hundreds of shelves just myself. So like made a nice little bit of money. So then was able to move New York on that and like be okay before having to get a job.
Whatever you have to do to be here and just make artwork is, it
Oh
doesn't really
yeah.
matter. We have this idea in our minds that we want to be artists that sell our work and we're supporting ourselves from our artwork, but it's usually a lot more nuanced than that.
Oh yeah.
People. that you think that are like seem to be, oh, they must be doing great. They might have a side hustle or
Oh,
probably do.
it is so interesting because even the people who sell a lot,
Yeah.
things are happening behind the scenes in a way that you're like, actually, we make the same amount of money. And like, I'm not making a ton of money at my job, but I'm like, it's sketchy when you're like in that position where I'm kind of like, I feel very blessed to have the position that I have where I'm like, I am working full time and I have enough time to make my work. And like the work that sells is like great because it's like on top of already being stable. But because I have financial stability because of working, I'm able to make the stuff that I want to make in like an honest way, but also in a way where I'm like, I want to make my own paint. So like I can buy all the pigment to do that.
You
And
can do
like,
whatever you want. It's
yeah,
liberating, it's freeing.
yeah, and I think that kind of thing when you're like beholden to the market, when you're in a like a smaller space is way more complicated because like you get pulled in like 45 directions versus being like I can be truthful to myself through and through and do what needs to be done. And I think that
It's great.
is it's like weight in gold almost where it's like
Absolutely.
so I feel very lucky for that at the bare minimum.
What's the job?
I work at Anton Kern as their archivist,
Ah, awesome.
which is great also because I like get to work with artists who I really appreciate and like also just like looking at work all the time. So it's like it's nice and I feel like they're very like there's like they're not as gatekeepy like everyone like about the relationships where like all the directors are super sweet. So it's like often I will be in artist studios like coordinating the photo and that kind of stuff where previously other galleries I've worked at, the like there's a little more tightness there, which is like I can see how both sides work, but it's nice to kind of have that directness with the artist because it's like I can kind of tailor an experience to them where it's like I like know that you like your work shot in double exposure with raking light, where it's like totally. So it's like if we work with a new photographer, I can share all this information.
And it's a great gallery for painters. They show awesome work.
Totally. And I think that's also the thing too. It's like you see how the sausage is made. um
The real skill in working in galleries, which I've done for a number of years as well, is still staying interested and seeing
oh yeah.
and realizing how privileged it is to get to do it and to get to see this stuff. Some people become jaded and they don't even care. It's just a job, whatever. But I love getting to see this stuff. It's really a gift to get to
Oh,
work around it,
100%.
isn't it?
Like I think about Ellen Birkenblit, for instance, where it's like I've like loved her work for a really long time, and like the fact that like I get to work with her at all, and like I she actually just had a show open at Allentown in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, iconically. But like helping her like with the wallpaper for that show and like building the SketchUp and like doing all that kind of stuff, it
Oh,
like
it's
feels
fun.
really fulfilling. Where I'm like I just like value her opinion, period, and like let alone being like a tiny cog in the machine to like help her push this thing forward is just like feels very good.
That's really good.
It also feels like that kind of thing too, where it's like you gotta pay the dues in a way that is like you like learn a lot, and I
It's
think it
important. You learn a lot.
yeah
It's a
it
learning
pushes you to
experience.
a good place.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Also, like Anton's cool in the sense like I have the week off to go to Brigitte's, which is great, and then I have a show in like October November in Dusseldorf, and then have a show again in London in 27.
So they're
So it's like
supportive of you as an artist.
yeah, like they're very chill about me taking the time, and it's like not weird. So it's like very I feel very very lucky for that.
So is that how you met Bridget?
Yeah, which is like
Yeah.
so funny because also it's like I mean our world is so tiny because it's like um like so I interviewed with Kristen who's at Anton and we actually had mutual friends and one of them being Andrew Sim who's represented by Anton now who is iconic and makes amazing work and then that conversation happened and then met with Bridget to like kind of confirm like I'm a good candidate and figured out that which I knew but was like I need to share this in a way that doesn't feel crazy but my one of my really close friends Donna studio manages for Ann Collier. So like who's represented by Anton. So there was all this kind of like connective tissue already there. So it was nice to be like, is this okay?
That's great. Oh man, Kevin, it's been such a pleasure to talk.
Yeah,
Before
thanks for
we,
having me.
of course, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of
Before we go,
course.
I wonder if there's anything else you'd like to share.
I feel like the plug, I guess, is Brigitte Dream House,
So, Dream
February
House opening in
13th.
Bridget in Paris, February 13th.
And then I guess, well, yeah, we'll do the whole plug. Then I'm doing the show with JVDW in Dusseldorf, which I think is October, November. We have to pick the day, but very excited about that. And then I'm trying with 243 Lose again in London. So
Amazing.
it feels like I feel very blessed to have the kind of positionality sorted.
Well, I wish you great luck in all these shows, and I hope the install goes well.
Thank you. I'll send you photos.
Please do. Yes.
Oh my God, thanks for having me.
Thanks for coming on. Tell Bridget I said hi.
I will.
All right. Take care, Kevin.
Bye.
Bye.